Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. This is part 2 of my Krita tutorial series. In the first video, I explained literally everything you need to know in Krita, but in this video, I'm going to walk you through my whole drawing process from start to finish in this portrait and telling you how I use those tools in an actual digital painting. So now for the size of the painting. Most of the time I just type in a random number, but for this one I used 694 times 874 pixels. Then I click create, and if I don't like the size, I can just select the canvas size I do want and click on image, then crop the image to selection, and there you go. For the layers, I know some people like to organize them beforehand, but I came to this drawing having no idea which style I was going to do, so I ended up using a painterly style with very few layers. However, it definitely helps to color code them, put them in groups, and label them. As for the actual painting, I basically just used two brushes for this whole thing. The bristles hairbrush for all of the blending, and then for bigger areas I just used the basic blender. I started by sketching out the drawing, but it wasn't really working out, so I decided to go with a completely new style instead by blocking out the shapes with the color straight from the reference. Remember to color pick by clicking Ctrl. It is literally the most important shortcut, especially if you're doing this kind of style. I found this reference after like 10 hours of scrolling in Pinterest. It has some really cool colors, so I'll leave the link in the description in case you want to check it out. At this point, I'm basically just adding more and more colors and definition without too much detail, hence why I'm completely zoomed out. Then I start blending all the colors in a particular area. I started with the mouth and chin, then moved on up to the nose. Even if you're coloring a neutral skin tone without this many colors and hues, you should still make sure you are shading by adding shadows with saturated colors. Most beginners, including me when I was a beginner, start off by shading with black and gray, which is just going to make it look very muddy, whether shading with a darker but saturated colors will leave a much more bright and cleaner look. After that, I'm moving up to the eyes. For the glasses, I actually used a vector layer. This allows me to move that line that I have already drawn and transform it into any shape without having to redraw it every second. Plus, the edges look a lot cleaner. The hair was the hardest part because it had no shape or main colors. It was just a hairy mess with 3 different colors in various shades. So instead of just blending the strands that I had already drawn, I made a new group layer. Inside, I made a layer where I drew in the complete outline of all of the hair, doing my best to simplify the shapes but still make it realistic. I added a new layer and made it alpha lock so that I don't paint outside of the shape in the layer underneath. Then I added all of the shadowing in black in this layer. After, I went back to the shape layer and started coloring the strands in pink, purple, and blue. Then I went to the shadow layer and made it a clipping mask so I can color the shading. It's really confusing, but if you see it and do it, it actually does make sense. After, I added highlights and a new color dodge layer with low opacity. Then I edited the brush I was using until I had a sharp point at the end so it looks like a hair strand. In a new layer, I added all of the stray hairs by color picking from the previous colors I used and this really made the hair look a lot more realistic and better, with much more flow and movement to it. Since the hair is kind of blurry in the photograph, especially the hair at the left behind her face, I selected it and separated into different layers and added a blur to it. After that, I moved on to the background. I redrew the whole thing, and since the lights have a blurred effect, I drew them with the airbrush in lower opacity. I also added some highlights in the color dodge layer to give it a more glowy effect. And the final step, the jacket. I really felt like skipping this because digital art is just, it's very daunting. Like when you're actually drawing it, it just feels endless. Or at least for me, I just really don't want to keep going and I give up on the sketch part of the drawing. So for me, this was like a record, to have drawn this far, to have actually been so close to finishing. And I was actually very close to giving up because I was just, no, I don't want to draw this jacket, it's too much work. But I pushed through it. Somehow I did. I put all the shapes in different shades of blue. I also gave up on the pineapple patch because once again, it was too much work, it wasn't looking good, and honestly, it doesn't make that much of a difference, so I'm not mad at myself for that. I used this pencil texture brush to add that jean texture to it, and I also added the pink from the light since it was reflected on the fabric. Once again, I blurred some bits and started to mess a bit with the saturation values, all that stuff to make sure they were the right shade. Basically, I put all of my layers into a group layer, which I duplicated. Then I took the layers from the duplicated group and merged them together. Then on the layer, click Ctrl plus M to open up the color adjustment filter. Then I just moved this curve around until I was happy with the colors. And it is done. This artwork is not the best. The colors in the face are not blended very well and it looks a bit muddy. I can see so many things that went wrong that I just didn't push through or gave up on. But you know what? I spent 4 hours on this painting and it paid off. I'm proud of it. I hope this inspired you to make some amazing art yourself. Remember to be kind to yourself and your art. Thank you so much for watching and have an amazing, wonderful day. Bye!